I think at this stage I'm encouraged to write more. When I first got the diagnosis, I kind of went, I'll just continue as is. Now that it's starting to bear its teeth, I'm thinking I really need to be getting on with this.
I need to get these stories out.
Yeah, I need to get these stories out. And even if I don't know once they're out and I pick them up and go, oh, they're nice, who did that? I'll be happy.
Janet, welcome to Hold the Moment.
Thank you very much for having me.
So when we talk about looking after your brain, a lot of people think of different things you can do, puzzles, activities, memory games. But for you, it's creative writing.
It is indeed, yes.
What do you think it does for your brain?
When I write, mostly I don't like what I've written. I'm on a bit of a journey whenever I write. Apparently, when I was about 3, I tried to stick together with glue lined paper and write a story for my mum because she taught me to read, so I wanted to give it back. So I feel like I'm doing something for myself but also for other people. I'm enhancing my life. I'm doing something that I've loved since I was a tiny girl.
You haven't always been a writer. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, because you'd always wanted to be a writer, but that didn't happen till later on. So what did you do prior to that?
I was a school teacher. The same mother that taught me to read at 3 said, don't be a writer, be a school teacher. I was a teacher, but then I went on and got involved in women's education in TAFE, empowering women to return to the workforce. Loved that, just loved that. There's a feminist heart beating within. And then went to Flinders University and got a PhD in creative writing and looked at writing as therapy.
Why do you think writing works as therapy?
There's probably better people than I who've done more research on it, but I think it probably sparks different parts of the brain for different reasons in different ways. And I think that's why the people, and there haven't been many, so it's not a study and not a valid study, but the people I've worked with to write stories who've got dementia of various kinds, they can achieve something and feel good about it. And it's the feeling good, I think. That I'm not sure whether I answered the question, but that's why.
And so has that background, has that knowledge, has that shaped what you've done since your diagnosis?
I thought I'd get this in somehow. When I got the diagnosis, I said I'm not sitting in the corner with a blanket over my knee. So I did want to investigate going to people and talk about creative writing. And I got very, very lucky. A young woman from Perth, WA, Althea Gordon, had done something similar with theatre in her mother's rest home. And she actually Althea had lots of people living with dementia doing lots of roles within that theatre production. And when I met her online through Dementia Australia, when I told her that I was a writer, she said, why don't we work with people who are living with dementia? Can they write? And I said, I can't see why not. So we put together a program. We put together a fund request from Dementia Australia, which they very kindly helped us with. I went over to Perth to do the first creative writing. There were people in the room who couldn't believe they were there. What am I doing here? How did I let Althea talk into this kind of thing? And by the end of the session, they were going away and saying, yes, we'll write this. And yeah.
Was brain health something you'd ever thought about prior to your diagnosis?
Well, my PhD was in therapeutic writing. So I wrote a memoir. And I researched the origin and development of writing as a therapy, and it has been researched widely in some detail that it can help in a whole range of situations with not just dementia, and certainly not dementia when it was first mooted as a possible therapy. And I
think the good thing with that creative writing situation is it's ongoing, isn't it? You can keep those creative stories going. So it's good for the brain to be
Yes.
thinking it through and what a
Yes.
potential different ending is, or
Yeah.
it's ongoing.
I believe in that too, but I think it's also a connection. Very often we sit down with somebody new, a bit like we did last night, Jim, and what we don't explicitly say, "What's your story?" but we find ways to get a story out of each other. Sometimes subtle and sometimes not so subtle, and we'll go away with a story attached to the person we've just met, and if we like the story, we continue to be friends. So I think that, I don't know, this is going to sound a bit old-fashioned, but I think that we sat around the fire in caves and we told each other stories, and it's the one true thing that has lived on. And
love that.
even internet and other things are
There's
not
not
gonna
enough
kill
of it, is there now?
Yeah, that's right. How did you guys? You tell stories. That's how you make a living.
Sometimes they make more sense than other times. Janet, you've got a pen pal called Ben.
Oh, yes, I have.
And he played a role, didn't he, in sort of encouraging...
How did you find this out?
We do research. People tell us stories, Janet.
Great.
It's how we connect.
My friend Ben. Patrick first met Ben, introduced me to Ben.
Just explain who Patrick is, because
Oh,
listeners
sorry,
won't know.
Patrick's my partner of 15 years or so. So he's an actor and Ben's a playwright and producer. So Ben moved to Melbourne, much to our chagrin, and one of us suggested, there's a dementia at work there, that we send each other a prompt every Saturday morning and we post it to each other, the story that we get back. And that was wonderful. That was, I was heaven on a stick for those nearly 12 months writing these stories backwards and forwards to Ben. And we were going to put them together and see if we could flog them around the place somewhere. But Ben got the job. I mean, really.
That's so unfair.
So I worked on it sort of for a while, and now I've decided to take some of my own stories from that effort and do some more. And also look at stories that I wrote 10, 15 years ago, and I want to get a collection together. It's getting to be time, and publish.
Do you think your writing has changed?
I do, actually, since the work that I did with Ben, definitely. His feedback was really good. His attention to detail was far supreme to mine, and it was fun to work with somebody who took an interest and could make suggestions and I felt safe with. I've tried to join a couple of groups. They're mostly good, but sometimes you find that they want the story that they would have written is something that I sort of worry about a bit. So, yeah.
Do you find that the dementia and the diagnosis has impacted your writing in any way, or has it encouraged you to write more? How did you find that?
I think at this stage I'm encouraged to write more. I think when I first got the 2022 diagnosis, I kind of went, I'll just continue as is. Now that it's starting to bear its teeth, I'm thinking I really need to be getting on with this. So
I need to get these stories out.
Yeah, I need to get these stories out. And even if I don't know once they're out and I pick them up and go, oh, they're nice, who did that? I'll be happy. So, yeah, I feel as if it has made me more
determined.
Yeah, determined. And something like this is astonishing. I've kind of got to do it now. It's on air. Well, maybe you'll cut it out, but
we won't.
Yeah.
Have you got a story you haven't written yet that you really want to write?
Yeah, there's a story of a 12-year-old girl. She's my granddaughter. She loves to read. We read together when she was very tiny, and her dad, my son, read to her. I'd love to help her write her story without interfering or being a heavy-handed grandmother, but I would love to be able to see her life unfold and the story of her life and maybe share that.
That's a lovely thing, isn't it?
The life down the track.
The life down the track, the life that I may not see. She's not, I think she's turned 13. She's a teenager. Maybe in 5 years she won't have her nanny tea. That's me. But maybe she'll have a story that I wrote that isn't necessarily about her, but about us or about growing up or about dementia. She will have that, and I'll be gone, but I won't be.
It's a lovely legacy to leave behind, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you run creative writing workshops for people living with dementia. You've referenced that. You said there's prompts. There's sort of skeletons there, paint by numbers, I think was the phrase you used. What happens in a session? How does it work?
Okay. We welcome them. They pretty much know what's coming. It's often their family member or carer has seen and learnt about it and wants to join in. We go around and introduce ourselves and say why we're here, what sort of things we might expect. That's from my old days teaching women's studies, and the women's got to all share and talk in the round type of thing. And then I say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find a character. So just write down a sentence or two about somebody that you know. It could be anyone from any part of your life. Write something down about them, and then we stop. And they write, and I might ask them to share a little bit. And then we move on to, well, where are they? You've got this character. They sound like fascinating characters. Here they are. They do podcasts. They're really interesting people to talk to. But what kind of situation are they in? So we, and they come up with some really interesting things. One guy sent, in the first one, sent them up in a rocket to the moon, I think, or Mars, something like that. Wasn't quite expecting that, but he pulled it off. So, and we stopped again, and then we let a few people talk about where the scene is. And then we talk about, well, what's the trouble? What's the block? Every story has a need, a necessity, an issue. Sometimes they're positive, how do I organise this birthday party? Sometimes they're dire. And that gets interesting then. People might dredge up something. So you've got to be very careful at that point about looking after them while they're going through that. And we share again, and then we do the next step, and then the next step, and we get them to read it out. And then we ask them to go away and polish it and that kind of thing, which is why we produce the Creative Writer's Guide. So it's got the steps, very, very basic, but it's also got more prompts, and it's got ideas for how to keep going and maybe broaden the scope and whatever.
It's such a great concept because it's social, so they're getting together, and then you're flexing that muscle. Your brain's like a muscle, so you're using that to think, and it's an enjoyable process. So it ticks so many boxes.
And they're sharing with other people too, and with people like them. And when they find out that I've got dementia as well, they really respond to that. They know that I'm somebody that's never going to judge them or talk down to them.
Do you think it relaxes them?
Yeah, I think it might. I don't know whether it relaxes me, Hamish, but it relaxes. I think it might, because we're all in this together.
Obviously, memory becomes a more complex thing for people living with dementia, and often for stories we rely on memories. What happens to people that take these workshops? Do people find memories that they haven't thought of in a while? What happens for people with those backstories, that hinterland? I'm
going to tell you one of my favourite stories. It was the last writing workshop in Adelaide, and Patrick helped organise it through a friend of his who's also an actor. And her mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia, and Eliza, the woman I'm talking about, said to her mother-in-law, Patrick's got this partner and she's got dementia and she's running this writing workshop, and would you like to go? No. And so Eliza and her daughters and her son, her husband, just tried to get her there, and she was going, no, I'm not interested in writing a story. No idea. Anyway, somehow or other, one of the granddaughters managed to get her in the car and bring her along to the session, just gently, lovingly. And when I did the round, like I talk about, who you are and why you're here, she said, I'm not sure why I'm here. Things to this effect. I'm not sure why I'm here. My granddaughter told me to come. The family's been telling me to come along. So here I am. And I just welcomed her like I welcomed everybody else. And then we went through the process of the 5 steps. And at the end, we get them, if they are happy to read their stories. And she read her story, and it was so good, and she was beaming. And we got the message a couple of days later that night she went home and wrote 3 more.
Wow.
And I mean, I was a bit teary about that. And I think, to answer your question, that's it. If I can inspire somebody to do something that she gets great pleasure from.
And the wonderful thing is there's no right and wrong with creative writing. Doesn't matter if it's jumbled up. It can be anything, really. It's like my grandkids, when I do a bedtime story with them, they will 8 times out of 10 want a made-up story from me rather than the story read from the book. So, there is that aspect to it. There's no right or wrong to any of it. You can just make it up as you go along.
Exactly. And, sometimes it works if you want to get it published, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it works in a workshop and sometimes it doesn't. But it's the act as much as the outcome too that we also focus on. It doesn't matter if you get a story collection. People, have you had fun? Have you relaxed? Have you met somebody that is interesting to talk to? Have you enjoyed yourself?
Can you give listeners a prompt? What's one of the prompts you would give?
I don't. No, I don't. I just get them to find a character.
Okay.
So
help us find a character.
That's up to you. I'm not going to give you the character because it's your character.
Okay.
So just give me a character that you, either from your past, that you know is an interesting person, or a character that you'd like to see or create, and just give me one sentence about that character.
Off you go.
Oh, mine was the postman. He used to come to the end of the street and we would talk, and he'd be telling me about his deliveries that day and that sort of thing when I was young. So I'm thinking of him. How about you?
Was there one box in the delivery bag that day that he didn't have an address for, but he knew he had to deliver it?
Is this the story developing right now?
I think my work here is done.
Yes. Very clever, this one.
Janet, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you both so much. It's just been a delight.
Hold the Moment is a podcast from Dementia Australia, produced by Dead Set Studios.